Tina, and I'm coming to you from the Jupiter area of Florida. And I'm outside. I'm creating this outside because I want you to hear the birds. I feel so entirely grateful and lucky that I get to be outside on my patio, that I hear birds singing, that I see beautiful plants around me, and that I can feel free. And something really sparked in me today. I did watch several different aspects and points on what's happening in Eastern Europe. And I felt very compelled to share my story as of being a child and my experiences and my perceptions and some encouraging things that I was led to watch today. And it may or may not be correct, but it gave me hope. It gave me perspective. And I think so many people are really unaware of so many factors. We live in this global world. And I am 100% Polish. I'm second generation Polish. My family, everything was about Poland and Polish. And we all know that those borders had changed so much. Horrific things happened in Poland, and how I ended up to be here. And I'm so grateful. They put my grandmother on a boat. Can you imagine the boats maybe in the 20s to Ellis Island? She was just a young teenager. Stories are not clear. I wish so many times they speak in Polish or I hear conflicting different stories. But I'm thinking that my grandmother, and she even lived with us, but some things are just unclear. And I believe that she was maybe 15 or 16 years old. So she was the only one in her family put on that boat, not knowing anything. And you can imagine how long it took to sail across the Atlantic Ocean. And she was ending up with a distant relative that had already immigrated over here. And I wish I'd asked her more questions. I wished I had known more. But I was sort of ashamed. My grandmother was about 4 foot something. She sewed her own clothes. Her teeth never came in correctly, and wore a long braid into a bun, and worked really, really, really hard. She had been married twice. Men died young in those times. I don't know what the first husband was. My mother's mother. My mother was the second child. She had a stepbrother, and her father. I believe was a bricklayer. They were all from the Bronx, and you had, the Polish section, the Italian section, all Ukrainian, Lithuanian, all Irish, and so they all knew each other's cultures, but they kept their cultures sacred and helped each other as a tribe and a community. But my grandfather, my dad always says, it was where they lived because they had to walk up 5 flights of steps, and he claims that that's what killed him young, because here you are laying brick in all kinds of weather for all those days, and then you come home and have to climb 5 flights of stairs. Although right now I think a lot of us could use that kind of walking, and I used to do the stairmaster because I know I've been too sedentary. But I share that because culture was hugely important. Like, they were almost obsessively Polish. The plumber, he's Polish. Oh my God, that football player and coach, he's Polish. It was like we weren't allowed to be with other people almost. It was like, and so I was it was the 60s. We moved from Long Island when I was 6 years old to Miami. So, everything's new and shiny and very contemporary ish in the 60s, the Jetsons and all this. And it was like we were, supposed to only do things that were Polish. And so our culture wasn't like that. It became very Spanish, as a matter of fact. And I also was dealing with Cuba. My maiden name was Khrushchevsky. So maybe some of you are young and you don't know about Khrushchev, but that was a very serious thing. And I was in Miami, and Cuba was right there, and Khrushchev was funding Cuba and keeping it all communist. And how many miles is Cuba from Miami? We were always on high alert. In fact, people even had bomb shelters in their yards, like you didn't necessarily know. It was like, wow, you have one, because the Cuban Missile Crisis. We lived on edge like that. And got made fun of all the time in school. Nobody else had Polish names. And I would come home from school crying all the time. I'm even getting choked up now. We had our house papered. We had a half acre, a beautiful home in Miami. My family and my parents were hell bent on, becoming very successful people and entrepreneurs. My dad had a global aviation business. His father died when he was 13 years old. He supported his mother, shining shoes, selling newspapers. His life was very, very difficult. And then, they're taking care of parents. So, he was very, very involved in growing a business and giving us a life that he did not have. And of course, it was really viewed as materialistic and leaving a legacy. And for the next generation, people did that. But we were very involved in the Polish American Club. My parents gave generously. They became philanthropists. They even helped fund a place in Washington, D.C., like a townhouse showing all the culture of Poland. And trust me, they're very intelligent people from Poland, many astronauts, doctors, scientists, musicians, and artists. Many, many famous, famous people. And some even came here to fight for America. So my mother was very active in the Chopin Festival. So they would fund and do scholarships to bring a musician artist, piano player, and they would come and have to, audition, and somebody would win the Chopin scholarship. They also kept going. The Bolognese ball. There are very few of those left in the world, and I moved away at like 18 and really stayed away from my family. However, I was proud to be Polish, but I was not obsessed about being Polish. And being the oldest child, it was not always easy. And there were a lot of prejudice between the different cultures. Oh, I named my daughter an Irish name. That's an Irish name. How can you name your daughter an Irish name? And I named my other daughter a French name. How can name your child a French name? But I'm grateful for my father because he had a global business and I got exposed to many cultures and I embraced that. And Miami was a global city and I love that. I am very grateful for my heritage. However, I'm a student of all cultures and I believe we are all one. But, like I said, getting made fun of all the time and my dad comforting me. And, a lot of times we wanted to change our name. We would beg him, please change our name. But he did use an alternative name in business. He used the name Cruz. And my brother pronounces it differently. They pronounce it Krasuski when it's really Khrushchevsky. And we had a lot of Ukrainian friends because they would gravitate, culturally, those borders were so close and they shifted and our cultures overlap. So some of our very close friends of my parents were from the Ukraine. And as a child, I didn't understand all those differences and such, So some of the words you would say were different the ways of making stuffed cabbage and pierogis, or they had their own dishes and their own things. And were brought up with our culture, but it didn't come at a cost either as a child. Um, and I never really dated anybody that was Polish. And I remember this one guy, he's like, well, that's funny. You sure don't look Polish. And I said, well, what do Polish people look like? And people had, of course, the Polish jokes. Can you imagine just constantly coming home with all of that trauma? Really, as a young child, that is a lot of trauma. We all want to fit in and belong. And I told this young gentleman that I really did want to go out with, and he was quite hot and handsome. And I went to an all girls Catholic school, but I was a cheerleader for an all boys Catholic school. And he said, I said, well, what do they look like? And I said, you know what? I look extremely Polish. And lately, I'm talking maybe in the last 10 years, people had shared with me that surrounding countries, Germans and Austrians and other countries, would come to Poland seeking out their wife because the Polish women were beautiful. And I'm like, wow, that really gave me so much more confidence because I was always being put down. And, that does a lot to children's self worth. That does a lot to their confidence and understanding. And my heart, I hope I don't start crying, goes to these children. This is an unbelievable trauma in their life that they will hold in their heart for the rest of their life, because I spent my whole life defending being Polish. And I can't imagine. I'm out here because I'm thinking of all the people hunkered down in the subway stations, in the basements, trying to find somewhere safe to go. People walking over the border to Poland and Poland welcoming them. The United States has been created as an immigrant country. Everyone came from somewhere else. And I think we're forgetting that. Yeah, there are first settlers, but we are all one nation, one world, one people. And where are our hearts? Where's our understanding? So let's fast forward to, let's say, 50 to 60 years later. You know, it's almost like has been a melting pot. We, as a child, we sent everything to Poland because our family was under communism. My parents had left. We have lots and lots of relatives over there, relatives I had never met. Some are dentists, some are doctors, but still living in poverty. We saved all our clothes. We would always have bags. Wait, send it to Poland. Don't throw that away. Don't give that away. It has to go to Poland. But most of the time, we sort of knew they never got to our people. Who knows who confiscated anything under there? My point is trying to relate to what communism is. Look at Cuba. What they have 1950s cars still, and they're this close to the United States, and it has opened up a little bit. Look at the suppression. That's what I'm talking about, the suppression of the people. And I've sort of had a preconceived idea of the Ukraine. I really have never investigated the country, but just seeing the pictures and the sophistication and the contemporary way of even the subway station, and how everyone's dressed, how everyone is calm, how everyone seems educated and assessing the situation and not being in this outrageous panic. And so I understand, but that era of suppression, it does something to you. I've seen it in the threads of my family. People don't know who to trust. They don't trust each other. Think of all the Poles that were so afraid. They didn't know who to trust, who was a Nazi, who wasn't. Look at all the Poles that hid children, hid families in their walls, risking their lives so that they could escape and be safe. But what happens is a whole culture of paranoia, of distrust happens. And I'm in the second generation into that. I see in my cousins and my family threads, like, people aren't close and loving and hugging. People have to harden their heart and shelter for the horrific things they're seeing. Look at these people watching maybe everything they work for, their homes, their businesses, destroyed in a minute. For what? Their whole life gone before their eyes. I see the mothers trying to keep their children calm and show a demeanor of not fear and worry when they are scared out of their minds and terrified. But they don't want to show that to their children, because you're instilling these things into their lives and children. They're never going to be the same. They're never going to be the same. And so I deal a lot with trauma and overcoming limiting beliefs. And look at the amount of people being hurt this way. And who knows of the ripple effect that all of this will be. We all have to deal with sanctions in order to try to stop this in a more peaceful way. We have weapons today of mass destruction that, what are we going to do? Just destroy our world and the people that are here? For what? Because one person is greedy and wants an empire? I thought the medieval times were gone, but I've seen it in my own country. And I'm not even going to go into all of that politics. I just want to impress upon you what suppression, what communism, what tyranny does. And watching it in real time, I really thought that after the Holocaust, in people that have been still alive dealing with that this could happen again. We all read our history from all the different countries. And let's face it, France, Spain, England sent their boats out to all different areas of the country. And it was always capturing another nation and growing another nation. But it just hasn't felt real in this contemporary time period. And that it could happen, that things were in place, that this could happen. And believing lies. But it also makes me think of the parallel of abused people, maybe even in a marriage. Because until somebody hurts somebody, until somebody is killed, nothing can be done. The same with sexual abuse, the same with parental alienation that I'm dealing with. Some person can just determine that you're not valuable, and we're going to tell everybody else that you don't count, you don't matter. But I wanted to shed some hope. And if you know me, you know that I am much more an extemporaneous and spontaneous speaker. When I write things out, I usually have an idea in my mind, but I'm being led what to share and what to say. When I have a script, it's horrible. Memorizing it, spewing it out. I just get downloads that are more insightful or that are a message I'm supposed to convey. And so now I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, messages of hope. So I can't help but not unplug because I want to be aware of what's going on. However, my main core and what I have come to know after many years of a lot of work, personal growth, and spiritual development is that we are all one and we're all energy. Really, we're almost 70%, or we are 70% water. Think of the moon, think of the ocean, think of the tides. We are led by energy. Everything is energy. That's all that exists, and it doesn't go away, it changes form. So I saw a couple of things, and I really have respect for Colonel Vidman. Yes, we've been fed all these my whole childhood. Then, of course, the Cold War. The young people today don't understand the Cold War, but we were also fed a lot of information and and such about the Cold War. And I've spent a lot of my life, now that I look back, being really afraid of a nuclear war and the Cold War. I mean, it was huge. Really, we lived by those standards, and it makes me realize how much anxiety I had for most of my life, and learning to let a lot of that go. And so, what comes with that is learning how to let go of limiting beliefs. So, the reason I wanted to share my childhood with you is because that was the belief system that we had. That's a belief system I grew up with, and I can see a lot of it still pending in my siblings and my family. However, I have moved on to different ideas that are as a different perspective than them, and everyone is allowed to have their perspective. But he shed some light on how much the people really want to fight for their country and freedom. They've had a taste of freedom, and they've elected freedom, and they've been building. I didn't realize. I really feel that it's almost like Prague, like Kiev is. It looks so interesting and so cosmopolitan and so interesting and so stimulating. And so to go back to something that is so much suppression. And I do like Rachel Maddox, and I listened to a couple of things that she had, because she brings in different experts and different information, so that sort of like old news, so you can decide and have a picture of things. And she brought in some people on sanctions. And I listened to someone else that was talking about Putin really as a leader. We know that everything is gone for the oligarchs, and the people have really, really suffered. And we see the people afraid. Some people are actually being arrested because they are protesting. They don't want this war either. So there's a lot of crossover between Russians and Ukrainians. They have family. Like I had family in Poland, and then that's all split. It's like the Civil War that we've had here, and how much also he has done many, many things. And one of those things is dividing people in healthy democratic countries. That was a goal of us, to weaken us. We have to come together. I'm not hearing the loyalty of being an American. We are questioning our president. Right now, that's who our president is. That's who we have to stand by and unite as Americans. Um, as opposed to being divided, because that's what they want. When you divide a country, and he's been doing this through cyber and misinformation in many democratic countries. And then they talked about the little pockets of countries where he has funded the disruptive, tyrannical, wacko person in that country, so that he could go ahead and have influence on that country. This has been a calculated thing for over 20 years. And here we are at his grand finale to overtake and be the emperor, and the czar that he wants to be. That's what his hopes and dreams are. I'm not going to go there because I know that will create big controversy, but it's about power. It's not about what those people have. And I didn't realize what a flailing and weak economy Russia has. And so when she pointed out um, the economic structure and everything and what countries it's compared to, and for being the largest country in the world, it has one of the weakest economies. Of course, as other people have billions all around the world, stashed places, the few, not the many. And so this has just been, did you ever play that game Battleship? I mean, there are people that love strategy, and that's why a lot of the gaming things are so exciting. But I think his whole goal in life is to play that game, no matter what it does to anybody's lives. And, I mean, I'm sorry, we're cheaters. We can look at the Olympics. We went right from being banned under the Russian name, and then they create another name. Nothing happens to hold back this person. Now we have nuclear weapons, and we can allow a bully to create this fear. So, what I saw was Russians are not happy. They don't want to go to war either. Where are their resources going to go? What's going to happen to them? Many of them have Ukrainian family. The Ukrainians that have been pointed out as being pro-Russia, they are angry because they are being used as the excuse for war. They loved Russia. They might have emigrated from Russia. They speak Russian. They are on the borders, so they are very involved and maybe have family in Russia, but they immediately have seen that they have been being blamed, like he's coming to rescue them because they do not want to be Ukrainian. So they're revolting. And what Colonel Vidman said is talking, I liked, because I'm not a military person and strategy is not my strong suit. So I rely on others. And I guess maybe this is just intriguing to me. I want to be in the know if I can find viable information. And so he was talking about the resolve of the people, that you cannot put a price and a number on the resolve of the people. And that when you have the passion for fighting for what you believe in your country, in your home, it's so different. And that the Russian forces, their hearts are not in it, or that they didn't even realize what they were going to fight, because those can be their brothers too. So this is just going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And what I want to implore with you, another big hope, what I'm seeing on Facebook is people praying. Prayer and raising your vibration in your energy is huge. It does so much. If you have not heard of the butterfly effect, please look it up. One thing on the side of the world can change another thing through our thoughts, through our energy, through our prayers. Mothers know that. You can feel what's going on in your child across the world. We just got out of Afghanistan. This is more of a battle to fight, in my opinion. But, we're trying to save bringing our young people back into a war situation. There have been presidents that have gone into war because it's an economic boost in our country. Do you want that? We might have to make some sacrifices. It's really interesting because in the last year I love to read. I love to read novels. I always have serious things. Then it's like giving my mind a rest. And I prefer that than watching the movies, really. I guess I like to create in my mind the perception of what the words bring. And so I was drawn to some series of stories that were held in Hawaii, and just the nitty gritty of what it was like living in Hawaii, and then Pearl Harbor, or what the culture was, how everyone had to get along, how the fear with the Japanese inhabitants, with how everybody managed to help each other, or to just all the intricacies that you cannot know unless you've lived through an experience like that, and talk about it 50 years later, or however many years it has been, through the perspective and seeing the next generation and how that has influenced your country, your cities, and such. So I just felt compelled to talk about that because I have lived through suppression, always being in a free country and a free person, but those tangles of experiences from past generation filter down into all of our families and our roots of where we've come from. And I'm going to end with one last story. Well, my former husband, and it's so funny because I never dated anybody from the Eastern European area, but my former husband turned out was half Czechoslovakian. So many people ask about my name, and I kept it because of my children. And it's Dirtina, and there's a vowel missing, it seems, in our language. And so that's the only person I had, that's the person I had married. And his father was born in Vienna. And so, it's interesting seeing his family that there was a lot of suppression, especially towards the daughters. And so I was a teacher while he was getting his PhD at Ohio State. We were quite poor. And I had this little boy, and I taught first. Oh, I taught kindergarten first. I think he was in my I can't remember if he was in my kindergarten class or my second grade class. And he was so shy. He was from Iran, and just a nice little boy, Kazra. I will never forget him. But we're playing on the playground, and we had rules of no gunplay, whatever. And his natural tendency was to pick up sticks and everything. And his dad, it turned out, as I inquired, because he was so reserved, he was frightened, and so I got to talk to a relative. I didn't really talk to his mom because his father was a general in Iran, and she was in total terror and grief about her husband. And they got out, and this was in Columbus, Ohio, in Bexley, and making a life. But her husband is back there, and her country is back there. And so Kazra, I mean, when we started and he started learning more English and we could have a conversation, and I didn't want to bring a lot of things up because this little boy had been through so much trauma. They would go on their rooftops and in the summertime or whatever, and fire, bombs would be going down, strafing, weapons, you grew up thinking that's your normal life. So he had been exposed to this as such a young child. I wonder where he is today. But it just, those things open my eyes. And my whole bent is always about children. And it just saddens my heart that all these children that felt safe do not feel safe anymore. And I saw a few moms that they showed last night, and they go, we're trying to be calm. We're trying to be here to show and not create that energy for our children, to keep them as calm as possible, because we don't know what to do or where to go or what will happen. So thank you for indulging me today. But I wanted to share my personal experience. And it just felt like it had to come out. And I love you too, because I learned so much. I find myself watching more YouTube than television because I can pick and choose. I can watch things in snippets, and I get exposed to things I never would have thought to listen to, and other people's perspectives. I'm open to that. So I hope you are open to what I talked to you about today. So let's all pray. Please, that's my plea to you. Please take some time today to set energy and to send love. We know that love is the most powerful vibration that there is, and it can work miracles. Thank you again.